Good morning. Happy Halloween. We are meeting Unity Longmont Spiritual Center on the 31st of October 2021. And I will be speaking about the veil. And for music, we have Tim Ostdiek and Jenny Balogna. So we will start with a piece of music, please.
Wonderful. We're so happy to be singing for y'all today. Lord, when I'm broken, I'm in need. Feel that ocean, swallowing me. Send a raindrop down to the sea. Oh Lord, shine a light on me, shine a light on me. And on that morning, scared and blue, feeling hungry and thirsty too. Send a raindrop down to the sea. Oh Lord, shine a light on me, shine a light on me. Oh, shine a light, shine a light. 'Cause I know that in the darkness I'm alright. There's no sun shining, but inside I'm free. Oh Lord, shine a light on me, shine a light on me. Oh, shine a light, shine a light, 'cause I know that in the darkness I'm alright. There's no sun shining, but inside, oh, I'm free. 'Cause the Lord shine a light on me. Oh, the Lord shine a light on me. Oh, the Lord shine a light on me, shine a light on me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tim and Jenny. So it's at this time that we go into prayer together by taking a breath. Beloved presence, everywhere present, we join today to celebrate being together, to celebrate the light that makes us, creates us, and animates us. We celebrate the talents and skills and love of each other. We celebrate laughter. We also celebrate sadness. Whatever life brings us, we welcome it with open arms and open heart. And so it is. Another piece of music, please.
We're gonna do a song that I wrote, I Run with the River. I ran with the river, I ran. I danced in the mud, I danced. I found the voice singing in my head. And I ran with the river, I ran. from the North Platte to the St. Vrain. I ran with the river I ran. But I left my home for the wild unknown.
I left my home for the wild unknown.
I tried to build a good thing on my own.
But I tried to build a good thing on my own.
Threw my fist in the wind, drew my name in the sand. And I ran with the river I ran. From the North Platte to the St. Vrain. I ran with the river I ran. The river reflects a harvest moon,
And the river reflects a harvest moon.
and it echoes back every stone I threw.
Echoes back every stone I threw.
With a wandering heart and a gentle hand. I ran with the river I ran. Ran with the river I ran. I ran with the river, ran with the river, ran with the river, ran with the river I ran. I ran with the river, ran with the river, ran with the river, ran with the river I ran. I ran with the river, ran with the river, ran with the river, ran with the river I ran. I ran with the river, ran with the river, ran with the river, ran with the river I ran.
Thank you, Jenny and Tim. So I'm going to talk about the veil today, and with the question of, is it thinner at this time of the year? Not only do we celebrate Halloween, but tomorrow is All Souls Day. And I'm really aware of it darkening earlier and earlier every day, of my own body wanting to get more quiet, to be more still. So I'm starting this with a poem by Marie Howe called The Promise. In the dream I had when he came back, not sick, but whole, and wearing his winter coat, he looked at me as though he couldn't speak, as if there were a law against it, a membrane he couldn't break. His silence was what he could not do, like our breathing in this world, like our living, as we do in time. And I told him, I'm reading all this Buddhist stuff. And listen, we don't die when we die. Death is an event, a threshold we pass through. We go on and into light forever. We go on and into light forever. Since the 1960s, when medical devices were improved, resuscitation happens a lot more than it used to. And so do, as far as we know, near-death experiences get told, get shared with us. There are a lot of commonalities about these near-death experiences. And I remember reading information, maybe it was Raymond Moody's book back in the 70s, and thinking, this is so interesting. I really like hearing about it, and I don't want one. Please hear me. I do not want one. I think that it takes courage to go through that experience. and perhaps even more courage to talk about it. Many of the people that have had near-death experiences say they come back extremely changed. They come back even more sensitive to energies in our world. And they come back feeling very different from most of their family and their friends. And they long for a new tribe. The divorce rate is very high. And you can imagine if someone has literally died and had this enormous experience and then come back, that they are very changed, that their very identity has changed. And I know that as humans, we have a hard time letting go of any identity that we form because we see that as ourselves, who we are. And part of looking at near-death experience for me is a reminder of who and what we really are. We are not just these human bodies. We are not just our personalities. We are the light. We are of the whole of everything. We are pure consciousness. And yet in this lifetime, we have different levels of consciousness. And when we work on them through meditation and prayer, we can increase that consciousness. When we go to sleep, when we let go, something happens in our dreams, something happens to shift our consciousness. And when we have those mystical moments where we're looking at a sunset or golden red leaves in the wind falling to the ground, we have a little shift of consciousness then too. So imagine a near-death experience as a massive shift of consciousness. So I want to share a couple of stories. This first one is from a woman that is from Colombia, South America. And when she was born, she was very sick. She was very sick for 3 years. And one day, when she was a 3-year-old, she walked out of her house and there was this big tank of water. She had never been in a pool. She had no idea about swimming. She had no knowledge that you couldn't breathe in water. And so as a little girl, she climbs up a ladder and she falls into this tank. And she has this very powerful experience of trying to breathe and then having a little bit of panic because her body wasn't able to function in that. And she saw bubbles rising up and she went to the bubbles. They were lit. And she went to these bubbles. And then she began to have an out-of-body experience. And like many people who have near-death experiences, she described it as the greatest peace imaginable. She described it as going home. She described it as, for the first time in her life, not feeling pain and discomfort from illness. She talked about great light. And then the next thing she knew, she was in a room, her maid's room in the house, seeing her maid watch a soap opera. She could see everything on the screen. She could see how the maid was responding to watching this. Then the next thing she knew, she was above the house and she was then right in front of her mother, who was walking on the sidewalk toward the village. And she stood in front of her mother. And then she saw a dog and she had awareness of what the dog was thinking. What she didn't know immediately was that when she stood in front of her mother had a sense that something was wrong and came running back to the house and pulled her daughter out of the tank and did CPR. She was trained in CPR. And so some of the similarities of this experience is there's often light, There's oftentimes a tunnel that's dark, and then you come through light. And there's often a sense of other beings, not embodied, but often of light themselves. And a sense of complete freedom and joy and comfort. And one of the things that many people share is that when they come back into their body, there's often just this really drastic change and pain, discomfort, and a loss of not being in that place they were in anymore. And so there are a lot of people that have talked about their near-death experiences. One of them is Sandra Ingerman, and you may know her because she does a lot of teaching of shamanism. And she had the experience, she was hanging out with Ram Dass and Timothy Leary and doing a lot of psychedelic medications and having these wonderful experiences. And she said they're very similar to, but not necessarily as intense as a near-death experience. And she had several near-death experiences. One was she was in Mexico, I think with Ram Dass, and she got caught in a riptide. And she heard a voice within her say, let go, don't fight it. Well, gosh, isn't that a spiritual message? Let go, don't fight it, surrender. So she did, and she was revived after she was pulled out of the ocean. And she had this sense that we are here in this lifetime to know love, that beyond the veil, it's all love. And that here we have forgotten that, and we are here to embody it, to share it, to experience it. We're also here to have joy and to have adventures. And many people talk about we're also here to learn lessons, that our soul chooses to be here, that our soul makes a contract to come into a particular life and to have certain experiences in order for our soul to continue to grow and learn and have adventures. And so then Sandra had another experience where she was a forest ranger, and she was in a Jeep with 5 other people and driving on a mountainous road, and a big boulder started rolling toward their vehicle. And suddenly their vehicle shot off of the road and went down, straight down into a cliff and hit. And they were all unconscious. She believes that she died in that moment. And again, she was told something to the effect of, now that you've had these experiences, it's your job to go out into the world and share with people what this is like, what they're missing, what they're needing to remember. A number of people who have had this NDE, near-death experience, talk about the pandemic. They talk about the pandemic as a way of everyone slowing down. And truly, a year ago, we had that experience. Many of us were in our homes, either alone or with our families, not going out so much. And that the slowing down was in order for us to begin to become more aware of our own consciousness and to open up to bigger, brighter, better ideas. The other piece they talk about is that the pandemic was an opportunity for the earth, our mother, to breathe, and for us to pay attention to her, for us to recognize we are of her, and to take better care. Another piece of the pandemic was for people of like mind and like heart to join together to celebrate our lives, to join together to increase love, acceptance, and non-judgment. If we pay attention to what's going on in the world, that hasn't happened across the world. There's been a lot of divisiveness. There's been a lot of sorrow and sadness. And so part of what I want to remind myself of this morning is to be gentle with myself, to be gentle with the people I know and the people I don't know, and to try and remember at some kind of soul level what we're here for. A lot of the emphasis that people come back with is it's not about what we do, it's about who we are. So, how do we know who we are? Sometimes we know by acts of kindness. I had a blessing yesterday. I was coming back down a hill from my granddaughter's soccer game, and I saw an older gentleman and an older woman, and she had one of those canes with like little claw at the bottom. And we were coming down this slope. It was pretty steep. And the man was holding two folding chairs and her arm, and they were struggling to get down. And I was just led, as we often are, just to go up and say, "Can you use a hand?" And he said, "Yes." And my heart just expanded with that yes. And so I gently put a hand under her other elbow, and we moved down slowly. And I left that little brief experience feeling so at home, so in my body that I could make it down a little steep hill, and so in my soul. So we frequently think about those little acts of kindness as we're giving something. I got so much more than I gave just from that little moment. And so I invite us all to think about the times where we have consciously chosen to be kind to someone. We have opened a door. We have smiled. We have just nodded. And when we think about it, ourselves and others are so often saddened and alone and isolated during this time. And just that little gesture may say to someone, "I see you. I see you here and now as a person." And if our hearts are expanded enough, we might even recognize, "I see you as a soul. I see you as a soul here on earth, living in this body, living in your body." So I say that just as a reminder that when I look at these near-death experiences, they're pretty traumatic. And these people are vastly changed from their experiences. And I don't want one of those, but I want a little bit of that experience that can come from being present in a moment and paying attention and saying, "Could you use a hand?" So let's look for a moment at some of the wisdom that comes out of these people's experience. One of the things that is said is that in every challenge we have in our life, there is a gift. Every challenge we have in our life brings a gift. We see that, I think, with hindsight easier than we do during the challenge itself. So I invite you to take a moment and remember a challenge, maybe even having a sense of how challenging and difficult that was. And then as you move through it, perhaps with spiritual surrender, what was the gift? I was remembering this morning how I ended up in Longmont, Colorado. I think it was a gift. I think I am home. In June of 2008, the lease for my large office was coming due. And I had a business partner, and we had this huge office, and we would rent out space to other psychotherapists. And over several months, 6 of those different therapists said to us, I can't continue being here. I have a son who is sick. I am sick. My husband is sick. 6 different families had some kind of health crisis. And so as I looked at renewing that lease, it was $3,000 a month. And I just didn't see how I could maintain my mortgage and my half of this lease. So I told my partner I was not renewing and decided to see people in my home, which was an hour away from DC. And many of my clients made the trip out there, for which I am grateful. So there was a transition, there was a challenge, and there was a lot of gift in that. And then on July 21st, 2008, my partner died, totally unexpectedly. And everything changed. And it was really hard to see a gift in that. It was so sudden, so unexpected. One of my goals at that time was to stay present to every moment. I got the call from the hospital in California telling me of the death early in the morning. And the rest of the day and the next few days, I was aware of every breath I took. That night, a whole bunch of people, loved ones and friends, came to the house to celebrate, to mourn, to wail. And one guy, a Baptist minister, who had taken all of my authenticity courses, so he was kind of Baptist Zen, kept trying to get me to drink whiskey. Well, I'm not a whiskey drinker. And his thinking, and I think a lot of times our thinking is, oh, let's numb ourselves to this. Let's shift our consciousness so we're not so overwhelmed, so we're not so stirred up. He went so far as to pouring a Coke, putting whiskey in it, and putting it in front of me. I took a sip and whoa, spit it out right away. So I share that staying conscious for a number of days allowed me to open up to all kinds of messages from the other side, to all kinds of experiences that I experienced and got to share with my closest friends and family. So that experience reminded me, taught me that the veil is thinner at times than others. And what is the veil, right? It's in our brain. It's in our consciousness. It's amorphous, and yet we experience it as very real. So shortly after that, because my finances changed a great deal, I ended up going through bankruptcy. It was 2008. Lots of people were doing that. And every bank, everyone I spoke with was so kind. So that journey of declaring bankruptcy and then my home being foreclosed on was actually very gentle. And I likened it to being a spider in a house where someone takes a tissue, picks up the spider, and puts it outside. And that's how I felt. I knew I was to leave Virginia, but I didn't know where I was to go. And my daughter moved from Florida, Gainesville, Florida, to Boulder. So Colorado opened up as a possibility. And a dear friend of mine was going to move with me out to out to Colorado. And so we took a trip out here and we found a place we loved in Lyons. And we got back to Northern Virginia, and he met a woman from Boulder, Colorado, that had moved to Virginia. He fell in love with her and decided to stay in Virginia. So that could have been a challenge too, right? All of a sudden, what I could afford to rent was different. And so my daughter started looking through Longmont to find places that I might be able to rent. And she found a place for me, so that when my friend Rick, who was no longer moving with me, when we drove out here for 4 days, bringing everything out, we knew we had a place to land. And he stayed several days, and then he left. A couple of days after I moved into a very sweet place, my daughter and I were walking through Longmont, and we were at the corner of 5th and Main and saw a huge goose. There are many huge geese in Longmont. Goose was my partner's totem. And a few feet from that statue, I see a sign for Unity Longmont. And that very first Sunday, I attended church there. So I share all of this detail just to say, sometimes if we're able to surrender, and for me, sometimes it takes something big to get me there, then we are guided. We are never alone. We are always guided. And that is one of the wisdoms from the near-death experience. Another wisdom is all is divine intention. That is what we can rest into, knowing that divinity is love and there is good intention. We are reminded to relax and allow. I think we're at a pretty special period right now where we have so many ways of allowing our central nervous system to calm down, which then allows us to be open, more open to that guidance. The other thing we're reminded of is our consciousness, although limited, is already connected to the other side. So pay attention to what you see, to what you hear, to what you smell, to what you feel. Many people who have lost loved ones speak about there being something in nature that really shows up for them. And some people see dragonflies, regardless of the season, that remind them of their lost loved ones. Some people see butterflies. It's often something seemingly simple in nature. I see geese. Colorado is a great place to see geese. So what I'd like to do is just share a couple little of experiences that I've had of what I think were the other side helping. One night it was dark and I stopped at an ATM and the ground was uneven and I fell. I didn't fall like that. I felt as though I was being held as I went down to the ground. And of course, I was not injured in any way. I have shared before the story of my daughter and I hiking on a mountain, and my turning my head to talk to her behind me and suddenly feeling a pressure, a push on my chest that pushed me right back into her. And we turned around and there was a rattlesnake right in front of us. I had a friend, and this was before seatbelts, and she was driving a Jeep on icy roads in Pennsylvania. The Jeep flew off the road into the air and then hit the ground. But before hitting the ground, she had that same feeling of something pressing on her chest, and all the buttons of her shirt popped off. So an amazing seatbelt. There are many more experiences I've had, and I'm sure you have too. And so I'd like to open up for conversation, for discussion right now, invite you to share any of your own experiences or anything else that moves through you right now. We have discovered recently that our community likes to engage on a Sunday. So when you feel ready, just unmute yourself and share.
So David, thank you for that. The takeaway for me from your message, well, many takeaways, but the one that really spoke to me this morning was, we're here to be kind. And you know, the last few days I'm thinking, you know, I used to do all this stuff. I used to contribute, but I'm getting older now. I'm getting tired, or I don't have, and just to hear, well, just be kind. Whatever happens, just be kind. I love that. And then I will share one experience that stands out to me. So we were actually having sort of a midlife crisis time where we wanted to change our life. We both had corporate jobs, very demanding. And so we thought we wanted to retire early and get a place where we could farm or whatever. And I got this image in my head of what it would look like. And then I forgot about it. Well, months go by, we found this place. Well, we found several places, but none of them panned out except this one. And we moved in, we got there. And about a year later, I'm like, oh, this is the image that I was given, you know, 2 years ago about where we would end up. And I hadn't realized it until we'd been there for a while. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, to be open to that, to be open to receiving the image and then recognizing it.
Yeah,
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Bobby.
sure.
I can think of a couple of different times. One's for me and one is for my dad. When Chris and I were trying to plan our wedding, and Cliff, I believe, had the meditation place. Is that right?
Yes.
You know, we were going to have it there. And then he's like, that is if we're open. And I was looking around and trying to find a place, and they were exorbitant and cost. And I was meditating and went into trance. And as soon as the trance showed me what our altar was going to look like in our home, the things that were on the altar, everything. I mean, it was just so vivid that was, I knew then we were getting married in our home, because that was the image that came in.
Mm.
And the other thing that happened recently for my dad is he remarried after my mother died, and they had a couple of little dogs. When his second wife was in a terrible, terrible car accident, and she was mortally injured, but not during the accident. But she had the dogs with her in the car, and one of them was injured really badly and paralyzed, but he kept the dog alive. And, you know, she's fine, scooted around, but here in the last 2 to 3 weeks, he knew it was getting close to time. And he was keeping, Princess was her name. He's like, I was just keeping her in the kitchen. It was easier when she was having issues, and put her to bed and tidied up. Everything was fine. The next morning, when he came into the kitchen, he got her outside to do her business and everything. When he came back in, he kind of caught it out of the corner of his eye, but when he came back in, there was a huge leaf in that kitchen. And he knows that was from his second wife telling but it was time. And he's got that leaf on his altar in the house now because it was from her.
Yeah, powerful story. We need to be open to seeing that leaf and understanding it, and not just going to the logic of, oh, the wind must have blown when I opened the door.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, no, there's no door in that kitchen.
right, right. Anyone else? One woman who had a near-death experience remained connected to the other side. And she was told, get a dog, get a dog. So she started looking around for available dogs to adopt. And she learned of one that sounded just perfect. And so she drove like an hour away. She met the dog and there just was not a connection. So she was driving home at night in the dark, and an owl hit her windshield and was killed. And an owl is often a symbol of much mystical stuff. They're very, very powerful birds. So she stopped to pick up the owl, made sure it was dead, and decided to bury it. And it was dark, but she saw a light on at a house, and she went up to the house to see if they had a shovel she could use and where she could bury the owl. Well, they had a puppy for adoption, and that became her dog.
Oh,
While we were just talking, I had another connection. So for our altar, we put things that meant something to us on that altar. Go grab that, Chris. The leaf. So relating to the leaf, and I just now made this connection. Yes. We had this leaf on our altar that was from your grandmother or your great grandmother. We've had it for a while. We keep it in our china cabinet in a place of honor. So we put this on the altar. And my dad had given me a butterfly that he had given his second wife. And I had the butterfly in this leaf on our altar. And I just now made that connection.
Beautiful. Thank you. So at this time, let us open our hearts and minds to Tim and Jenny and a piece of music, please.
We were looking for some songs that might fit in on this Halloween and also fit in this space, and we found this song by Jason Isbell. It's called "If We Were Vampires." It's not the long flowing dress that you're in, or the light coming off your skin, the fragile heart you protected for so long, or the mercy in your sense of right and wrong. It's not your hands searching slow in the dark, or your nails leaving love's watermark. It's not the way you talk me off the roof. Your questions lack directions to the truth. It's knowing that this can't go on forever, and likely one of us will have to spend some days alone. Maybe we'll get 40 years together. And one day I'll be gone. One day you'll be gone. If we were vampires and death was a joke, we'd go out on the sidewalk and smoke and laugh at all the lovers in their plays. I wouldn't feel the need to hold your head. Maybe time running out is a gift. I work hard till the end of my shift and give you every second I can find, and hope it isn't me who's left behind, knowing that this can't go on forever. Likely one of us will have to spend some days alone. Maybe we'll get 40 years together, and one day I'll be gone, and one day you'll be gone. It's knowing that this can't go on forever. Likely one of us will have to spend some days alone. Maybe we'll get 40 years together, and one day I'll be gone, one day you'll be gone.
Thank you. Beautifully haunting. Thank you. So at this time, let us go into our donation of love and light by taking a breath together. And if it's helpful, place your hands on your heart. And breathing in, we remember we are light. We are love. And by simply making a choice, we can share that. So we become increasingly aware of that love and light expanding within us and around us. And if we know someone's suffering, we can send that love and light to them. And as we share this love and light, let us remember we are here to share our kindness. And taking another breath together. And so it is. And we'll finish with a piece of music, please.
There we are. In our quest to find other Halloween songs, we thought we should find one that might fit and be a little more fun and happy. I thought the banjo would fit well for that. Very superstitious, writing on the wall. Very superstitious, riding up the fall. 13-month-old baby broke the looking glass. 7 years of bad luck, good understand and you suffer. Superstition ain't the way. Very superstitious. Wash your face in the hand. Rid me of the problem. Do all that you can. Keep me in daydream. Keep me going strong. You don't wanna save me. Sad is my song. You believe things you don't understand and you suffer. Superstition ain't the way. Very superstitious, nothing more to say. Very superstitious, devil's on his way. 13-month-old baby, broken looking glass. 7 years of bad luck, good things in your past. And you believe in things you don't understand and you suffer. Superstition ain't the way.